All right, visitor and public comments, item 4.
If I may, have a memo that I pass around. I'm going to read it to you tonight. I'll spare you that. Just at the high points, I think you're well aware of the budget surpluses the last 2 years and the current one we're expecting for this year. And one thing you may not be aware of is that the projected enrollment is probably going to be much lower than they're projecting, but not updated the projections for 3 years. And this year they were down 21 more students than they had expected. The other thing is that the birth rate in Clinton in 2009 was 133. It dropped to 101 in 2010. It has remained at that level. That has not been adjusted in the school's enrollment projections. So you'll also see a projection, if you do apply those adjustments, as to what it's likely to be. Also included in information about the minimum budget requirement from the state, which we expected to go up this year because of the stimulus funds the previous year. But indeed they went down. The minimum budget requirement went down. So there's plenty of room that you can reduce this budget without being in any danger of violating the minimum budget requirement. I've also dissected some of the special education plans that I think you might be interested in. I'm not going to go into detail there. But the key thing is that we're proposing that we reduce the budget this coming year over year. Not a reduction in the proposed budget, but a year-over-year reduction of $600,000. You've been told in previous years that if we didn't pass these inflated budgets, that education and students would be harmed. And clearly that would not have been the case. In fact, the 2 years that we defeated budgets, if they had not been defeated, it would have been $1.2 million in surplus those 2 years, or 4% of the budget. So we urge you to right-size the budget for education this year. Thank you.
Anyone else like to be heard?
When we discussed the Board of Ed, which we did not touch operating, we talked about capital, because we know it's not a secret, there's a surplus, and there was a recommended reduction of basically $302,000 in the Board of Ed capital request, because the capital request was 402. We reduced. We motioned and voted to reduce 302 from that.
So the current capital is 102 or
100.
100. But you expect the Board of Education to come before the selectmen and say, out of this year's budget, where we have a surplus, these are additional capital items that we like to spend money on, right? The 302,000.
Take $300,000 and run with it before June 30th.
Not capital.
For capital.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but that's not what their attorneys say, as far as capital projects are concerned.
They got cut $300,000 at this point from the board, $302,000.
Right.
If they had a capital request of 402, and they see fit to take
that's for next year.
They can do it now. They don't have to. They don't have to wait till next year. If there's technology implementation stuff and stuff they want to get going for the summer, start it now. They want to do the school facility, so they can start it now. But we can't control what they do before June 30th.
But what I'm saying is that the premier guy at Shipman and Goodwin,
I've never heard that.
who is the capo di tutti capi of school law in Connecticut.
Jack, I've never heard that.
Doesn't have anything to do with capital.
It has nothing to do with capital.
That's a local issue. It's the idea of how a school could come before the authorizing body for using surplus at the end of the school year. Before we get there, prior to June 30th, the money that's been allocated to the Board of Ed is allocated.
But that's for very specific line items.
No, we have no line of control.
I beg to differ.
So the $100,000 for Board of Ed is not on this?
Yeah, it's on the capital.
We have nothing on.
We exercised the same thing we would operate. You don't have line of control over operating. If you're gonna cut, we didn't, this is that's it. You're going on.
In years past, when the audited surplus number is known, Board of Ed comes to the Board of Finance
So
in
this is what we wanna
September,
do.
October, and says, these are the items that aren't in our capital request, we'd like to spend surplus on this.
Right.
Not in September, October, it has to be prior to June 30th.
Well, I mean, we've been notified in September, October. I mean, I can go back years. I mean, I've got notes, it's in our meeting minutes, it's September, October usually is when we hear about
And
it.
that's been an understanding between the town and the Board of Ed.
Yeah,
So bottom line in the story is, we know there's a surplus,
Yes.
we know
If
this.
it's all this,
and we don't want to put it to zero capital-wise, because next year, if there is no surplus, it's going to be a bump. You know, the majority of the surplus, and I want to speak for Jack and the Board of Ed, is because of retirements. Unanticipated retirements. Well, we're weeding that pool thinner and thinner every year because we're getting more and more. And you can't bank it to be a surplus. So I would cut it to zero. We decided to cut 300. Give them, let them pull out of their capital plan this year what they want to do.
So on this schedule, the line items that are here that don't have any dollars, are those because there are dollars in the future, or are those things in the past that just have been done already?
What column are you looking at?
I mean,
First,
you know, like-
underneath first selectman recommendations?
No,
If
that
it's
has
blank-
nothing like the switch
She's looking at a different
replacement,
schedule.
like what, oh,
Those are old things that were requested and then just,
They're just,
If there's
they'll
no
be
request,
placed
there's no.
in future CECs.
or they were prior done, they just haven't taken off the list.
These
trying to get at
This is off our current list.
Somewhere out, this is,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
yeah, okay.
We haven't addressed it yet.
We didn't address it.
Well, should we address it before we go to the,
Please.
I mean, the Board of Education one was accepted by, and passed on in total as they presented it to the CEC committee, and it totaled out to $402,000. I can go over the highlights for you. The Board of Ed at the time for the Joel School had nothing. For the Pearson School, zero. For the Elliott School, they asked for $30,000 for a facility study. Jack's still here. And $13,000 for musical instruments. So on the school portion of their CEC, they requested, and Morgan, of course, was zero because of the fact that we have the new Morgan School Building Committee. So on the school side, as far as the 4 schools are concerned, they were asking for $43,000. And then on their Board of Education system-wide, they asked for a computer technology upgrade of $90,000, floor covering of $50,000, furniture replacement $30,000, equipment replacement $25,000, maintenance equipment replacement $12,000, unit heater restoration $20,000, seal and paint the exterior walls $15,000, heating and air conditioning, cleaning replacements, $10,000. Classroom door replacement, $7,500. Interior painting, $20,000. That's an ongoing through all the schools. Remote systems monitoring, $7,500. Electric power upgrade of $25,000. Clock PA system upgrade, $7,500. Phone system analysis and upgrade, $15,000. Levered hardware throughout the schools, levered hardware, if you will, $7,500. And sidewalk replacement, $17,000, for a total of, on their system-wide, of $359,000, for a grand total of $402,000. That's what they submitted, and the CEC left it alone. Now, I understand there's been some adjustments, or we heard this talk by the selectmen that they want to take out some, so I just, what are we doing here?
What they reduce?
They reduced 302,000.
They just took out a figure and didn't actually itemize, Jack, and left that
To you.
to you to do, is that?
That's my understanding.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happened.
So did you submit something for the 100 and whatever's left over? What is it, 102?
No,
No, 100,000 is left.
100,000 left, so they reduced to 302, so you got 100,000.
Of which you can't spend because you don't have anything specific to set up for it. Right?
I'm sorry.
You don't have anything for 100,000 in your plan.
You haven't submitted a request or itemized a request of 100,000.
Well, you have a list of the whole of the system-wide is work that gets done throughout the year and some work that gets done during the summertime. So that represents, the bulk of that represents the 389 that Dennis talks about. So by reducing it 302,000, what we would now have to do is to look at what of those items we absolutely need to be able to have available to us during the course of the year, and the rest of it we would be looking at figuring out how we would, what the priorities would be from the Board of Ed to purchase those things sooner than later. Unfortunately, some of that work, the floor coverings, for example, really can't be done during the course of the school year. It typically has to be done during the summer. There are the painting and sealing, some of the other work is really done during the summer. So that, we have, come in with a budget, a capital budget that is reflective of the current ongoing needs of the system. Are there some things that we could in fact get started on now? Certainly. But I think to just it seems like arbitrarily cut $302,000. I don't quite get the rationale for that.
Was the 402 part of the 0.59% increase? Is this
No,
the town side?
no. That's their operational side is the
Okay.
0.59.
Okay.
This is strictly on the CEC side.
And this gets voted on as part of the town budget or the education budget?
It goes under the Board of Ed side.
If you look during the presentation, it would represent part of the 0.93% increase.
The street clerks did it.
Yeah. Right.
There's 3 parts to it.
No input at all
Operating the capital
on the
and the debt.
302 cuts.
We haven't, when it happened on Wednesday, we're here on Monday at this point. The reality is that, to do the analysis, 302,000 out of this capital will make it very difficult to maintain the upgrades that we need to do. If I were to suggest a number that would be less than the 300,000, if that's what you're suggesting, I think pulling back. There's $389,000 in system-wide. The musical instruments we can certainly either we can buy now. We can certainly do that. We can certainly get started on the technology. Floor covering, not so much. Furniture replacement we could probably do. Equipment replacement is really an ongoing piece as equipment fails. Maintenance equipment, similarly, unit heater restoration, we have an ongoing process for doing that throughout the district. Much of that is we try to do during the summertime. Sealing and repainting is really, that's the exterior walls, summertime. The cleaning and replacements of the HVAC is summer. Door replacements is an ongoing piece. Interior painting is a summer project, and remote monitoring systems is ongoing. Electrical power upgrades, that's ongoing. It's not something you can do necessarily in advance. Similarly with our clocks and PAs, those are ongoing dollars that we need to be able to have in the capital improvements. phone system, levered hardware, sidewalk replacement would be a summer project, and the facility study, we could probably get started soon. We could put out an RFP for that and get started. So I didn't do a running.
No, that's
tally,
okay.
so-
No, I understand that.
But I would say that, you know, you're looking at,
Carol, what was the discussion to cut 302,000 from the Board of
The
Ed capital
discussion
budget?
was that the proposed surplus for the school, for the Board of Education budget this year is 2%. The figure that we heard at the meeting the other night was 2%. That's $600,000 in surplus projected for this year, that with that projected surplus, they can utilize some of that fund, those funds to take care of these capital projects that they have listed here. So not only would their capital projects be addressed, but it would also look like a stricter budget for the Board of Education at the end of the year as well. It wasn't that they weren't going to wind up with the money one way or the other. It was just taking it, lowering the capital budget to make it more agreeable going forward.
Well, the battle cry has been the last couple of years, last year particularly,
No
with surplus.
surpluses. Right.
And so, why the surplus?
You either have a surplus or you have a deficit.
No, I understand that, but that's not the debate.
Well, I mean,
We all want a surplus. Everybody wants a surplus. And you quite frankly,
$300,000.
2% on $30 million is not a lot of money. 2% surplus is.
But it is $600,000.
Right. And
Of projected surplus.
of projected
Okay.
surplus.
So, I mean, how does that help us budgeting for next year? What happens, you know, glass half empty statement, we have another storm. You know, and we take that surplus that we were thinking we were gonna use for the Board of Education's purchases, and we use it to, I don't know, clean up our town. I mean, I don't know if it's a good precedent to cut the Board of Ed capital budget to $100,000.
It's not
It's absolutely
Actually-
a deferral.
cutting
Sure it is.
the Board of Education budget to just reutilize the money for something that they say that they want.
But that money
We've
has
been
to
doing
be
that every year.
expended by June 30th.
Or encumbered.
It's all
Well,
done.
there's
It has to be
there are a great
encumbered,
deal of
isn't that
items in that
expenditure?
capital
No,
budget.
It comes back to the town, most of it.
Right. Whatever's left after June 30th comes back to the town.
Right, it has to, not encumbered, spent.
It's encumbered, right?
Encumbered, if it's encumbered, it's considered spent.
It's considered spent.
Correct. As long as the purchase order is issued by June.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That is true, though.
That's true.
Purchase order means you have to have
It's
vendors
encumbered, you have to have-
identified.
Right, you have to have the money for it.
So are we setting up a situation starting this year where we're gonna be giving implicit authorization to the Board of Ed to just spend every dime that gets,
No.
No.
well, I think this
How are
does.
you getting that from this?
Because I think that what ends up happening if you're running a department or you're on the Board of Ed and you know that they're gonna be looking at projected surplus numbers, they meaning the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
This can only happen
Let
with the
me
Board of
finish my
Ed.
thought, please. Thank you.
Certainly, Brad.
I appreciate it. If we are setting up a standard where the Board of Ed understands that if there's gonna be a projected surplus of 1%, 0.5%, 2%, this system now tells them that they should spend as much money as possible by June 30th, if we do this.
Capital items. On items that they have in their
What are they
budget
supposed to spend?
as necessary for going forward for
Is
the
that
Board of
little
Education.
glitch?
Well, I think the Board of Ed can spend the money on whatever they choose, because once it's appropriated by the town has no control over it.
Right, so that means next year when they have a projected surplus of $1 million, because a lot of people retire, or they save a lot of money on something, they can just spend that by June 30th.
If by law they could, yes.
Well, Brad, I think you're assuming sort of
I'm just
ill
saying the
will
other side of the
kind thing,
argument, Carol.
where
That's
you
all I'm
are
doing.
saying
There's
that
another side
they
of
would
the
go
argument.
and frivolously spend that money.
Right.
We were assuming that they would responsibly spend the money towards items that they have requested in their capital budget. We were not assuming that they would go out and spend it on items that don't appear anywhere in the items that they have requested. It would either be something that was in a line item that they couldn't afford, or it would be in capital that we have
I
effectively,
have faith in the board, I think
I
the
have faith in the
superintendent
board
is
as
gonna
well.
continue.
our issue was never to penalize the Board of Education.
I'm not saying you're penalizing them, I'm saying that you are
It was to restructure the
giving.
funding of their capital requests.
I just think that the timing is so compressed, because of what I've heard on this board, you know, in the past, is that you really don't know that surplus, so we can't talk about it as if we're spending it before it's not even real
We're
yet.
pretty confident, right, Bob?
Yeah.
Well, but the other case that I agree is that I think it encourages maybe rush to spending, and eventually, you know, if we get it, it does come back to the town, because it comes back in the form of, you know, we approve things out of undesignated, and to the extent that we do that, it does reduce. I mean, we just did that. We said, okay, you know, we'll push these things off so that we can pay for it out of undesignated. So the idea that,
Maybe.
you know, surpluses don't come back to the taxpayers, I think is
I would
wrong.
be very surprised to see, A, the surplus from the Board of Education be significantly lower than it's projected to be at this point, and B, see that
I would
if
expect
the
it to be
surplus is lower,
$300,000
it
lower
was
based upon
not
what we're talking
spent
about.
by, excuse me, Brad, but I am
Right,
talking
minimum,
now.
right?
But,
Yeah.
you know, Brad, rude goes both
I'm
ways.
just, listen,
Hey, you know
There
what,
was-
Carol, this is
here's
our
a,
meeting.
it was a thought, because last year everybody got banged around with surpluses. I talked to Jack the week before about potentially taking some money out of capital based on the projected surplus. And implementing some of that stuff, we were gonna wait until, you know, after the budget passed, hopefully not getting whacked, and going forward.
How
The same thing could be.
And here's the thing, it's reducing the burden to the taxpayers. Bottom line in the story. And that's,
Yes.
and I know philosophically, we all wanna do, we wanna buy peak trucks, we wanna do this, we wanna do all that, philosophically, it'd be great, we can do everything we wanna do. Want to put money back into infrastructure then, so $50,000 more in infrastructure this year than was last. So there's already an increase, okay? We want to do it all, but the bottom line in the story, regardless of what anyone wants to think, we need to get a budget passed. We have to put a budget forward to the people they're going to support. And I think this goes a long way towards, hopefully, I didn't see it tonight when Mr. Carr presented his, about the enrollment stuff. I would have thought that maybe by taking some of that money out of that surplus and putting it towards undesignated would have allayed some of that stuff. Apparently it hasn't. But this does,
Every year give an inch.
this does in effect reduce our overall expenditures, and it does in effect reduce our mill rate, potential mill rate increase.
And the
that's-
Board of
that's what it is.
Education is getting what they'd like to have.
They're still gonna get it, it's just gonna be funded, it's gonna go a different way.
Can't
Right.
we do it in a more like line item way? Like he just identified, I calculated
So
$133,000.
Jack can come in April with his lines of what he's gonna spend it on.
No,
If
no,
this is what you guys are gonna
reduce the
stick with.
budget by line item rather than just some
You can't.
random like slash.
The capital budget you can, but the operating you can't.
Like, I mean, so we were presented, I'm sorry, here that, this is like this is actually
402,000.
422,000.
402.
I mean, these are all their requests and needs, right? You had the BOE priority and the CEC recommended. And now we should just say, okay, trust that this is what they need. And we were just told what they can actually do before June 30th. So why don't we just reduce it by what they can do before June 30th? Rather than no, he just told us. And I calculated 90,000, the 13,000 instruments, and the
30,000.
facility study, right? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
and then I think, you know, we
But you could encumber
realistically,
some.
the 60 or the 30 for furniture replacement.
Right, the furniture replacement, the tech, maybe the tech upgrades, the musical instruments, and did you say the facility
150,
study?
160.
But it can only be encumbered prior to June 30th, if he lines it up.
The other issues,
Was it vendors though? Was it vendors to have a purchase order? I mean, this.
I think the issue,
They don't have to even bid this stuff, by the way. Board of Ed doesn't have to bid it.
All right.
Go ahead, Jack had something you want to say?
if I, just roughly looking at this, between $150,000 and $160,000 could be worked with between now and the end of the school year, in terms of items that were already on here that could be processed going forward or initiated going forward. The other 250, 230, 220 really are ongoing issues. We can't purchase equipment that we don't know for sure what we're going to need, because it's for replacing and maintaining equipment as we go. It's not, you can't do it all right now. So the differential that you're looking at of taking 300,000 and leaving 100 is probably closer, it's really flip-flopped the other way around, where it's closer to 200, 250 to leave in and take 150 out, 160 out. Given these numbers, given what we're projecting, what we could actually purchase now, if that is the intent, that we can get started on yesterday and start working with. I can give you a better handle on that, but I'm not going to be able to just throw that out. I mean, that's the best I can do right now. Between 150 and 180 is what we could probably go forward with, leaving the rest of it, because the rest of it is really ongoing work that we need.
So what I'm hearing from you is you'd like to at least have $150,000 reinstated back in, giving you a CEC of $250,000.
Yeah.
I mean, the long and the short of it.
Yes.
Bob, Jack, you guys keep talking about a $600,000 budget savings this year. Where specifically was the saving? Without getting into the weeds.
Well, majority
Insurance
is
and personnel.
insurance and personnel.
So it's something that has already been done. It's an event that took place. And
What
you've already
happened is the
saved.
budget was adopted last year and a number of teachers retired.
Understood.
Okay, and then the medical plan had a plan design change that was,
What I'm saying is these events have happened
yes.
and we're done.
Reasonably sure.
Okay. Got you. It's not continued planned savings, it's done.
Projected for the end of the year.
And your budget this year took into account those $600,000 in savings.
Yes, because we start with a new, all the personnel now, but if anyone retires after this.
You always have that, I
Right.
know, I understand.
And there's been 30 in the last couple of years, so they may be dwindling.
Or dying.
You guys don't say.
The number eligible for retirement is getting smaller and smaller as we, given the last 3 years. So we're gonna start not having as much turnover, I would guess, within even next year. I mean, we only have one reported so far. We may have a few more, but there's a window that between this year and next year is likely to be the end of the big retirements and the big differentials.
And with the medical, usually you see those savings in the first year or two, and then they start, increasing again.
Any other comments? Last word?
On capital.
Yeah, let's go to operating. All right, right off the bat, does anybody have anything they want to add or reduce from the operating budget? Is everyone happy with the way it is? So, does anybody have any comments or any motions, or do they want to do anything else with the budget? Reduce? Add? Now's the time, because, time to move on. Whatever we approve today goes to public hearing on April 3rd. And after April 3rd, we can make reductions only, right? No, we can change it. We can add and reduce.
You can
Yeah.
make changes.
After
Make
April
changes
3rd.
after it goes to referendum, you can't
After
do
referendum, you
any
can
leverage.
reduce. Thank you.
I still have an open question on Board of Education dues and fees.
Okay.
Because my number came up at 41,000, the number in the book comes up at 82,000. Jack was quite clear that the number of 41,000 on a per school basis isn't inclusive of other things. But
Correct.
I'm trying to find out what the other things are.
The other piece for dues and fees is actually when we calculate all that together, the formula that has been used in the past includes the vocational support number in our special ed line item, which is stipends and support for those students who have work experiences, and that number is growing at that point. So that differential, that increase, I think it's 27,000 is the increase, is ultimately represented in stipends for students who are actually doing job site works, that kind of thing.
Okay,
As
now
part of
that leaves another 14 grand.
It's that is the bulk of the differential. If I'm miscalculating the number, if you look in that section under,
I don't have a web page.
well, I'll just double check to see that I'm citing the number correctly. I thought the major increase there was in the special ed area. Vocational programming increased by 27.6. And I think that's, and then the other increases are just in general.
Increased by 27.6 to what number?
40.
Because my total was 41,000.
40.
So that sounds like it,
Yeah.
right there.
That's the, I mean, there are probably some small increase, there are
All right,
some
so
small
that's
increases.
the differential.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't get that to you in the email.
That's all right.
So,
Appreciate it.
so the motion we have in front of us still has the Board of Ed capital at 100,000?
Correct.
We said,
Can I speak to that? I did,
Yes.
while you were discussing other things, I did do a quick analysis of what's in that capital. And if, based on that, based on what could be done now, or we could start working on now, if we left 209,000 there, we could reduce it by 193. I think those numbers add up. Now, so we would use 100, we would apply,
so we
if
would
you will,
add,
surplus to the 193, and then leave 209,000 in, because the remaining items are really things that can't be done now.
so I guess I just prefer to have it be based more on an analysis. And so I would, I guess, make a motion to add, so that's adding 109,000 back into the.
Well, it would be, if there's right now, what they're
There's
saying is
100,000.
100,000, so it would be, adding 109 back, correct.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion about the motion? It would change the capital improvement budget under Board of Ed from 100 to 209,000. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
3-2. Ayes have it, motion carries. So 31,297,501 plus 209.
31,406,501.
Say it again?
31,406,501.
209 for sure,
Capital. Capital. Great. Gotcha. 31 million.
406,501.
406,501. Okay. All right, so we have total town at 15,441,209. Are we gonna make any motions or changes on that? That includes capital, operating, and debt retirement. Does anyone have any questions about the education budget? Any motions on the education budget, other than the capital we just did?
So since we come in every year with an average of $600,000 in excess of education for the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, why don't we not go into the minimum budget requirement? It should be a lower number, but still in the 30 million range.
Is it 30 million?
Yeah,
Or is it 31 million and change?
No, 30
$30,105,763.
I'm sorry, what is it?
$30,105,763.
Well, I think the answer to that was discussed at the presentation that we had, and we require people to come in and present to us what they need, and that's what they did, to just target it at, you know, a minimum budget requirement set by, not even in this town, I think is a little haphazard.
It might be about $1 million reduction from what we're looking at right now, a little over that.
Just for clarification with regard to the minimum budget requirement, the state is in the process of doing that analysis currently, but the projected concept of that is the way how they figure it is your last appropriated budget, and then any additional monies, and this year there's $6,074 in ECS, that would be added to that. And then the only area of reduction is that then from a minimum budget requirement standard is for the number of resident students that are less than the year before. You can reduce that budget by up to $3,000 per.
That would be 23 students.
Roughly.
So that's 79,000.
It's actually, the actual number that they're projecting right now is 71,880.
23.8.
I'm sorry, what was the number?
$71,880 is what they're projecting right now. And that's based, again, that's based on the fact that.
As a deduction.
As a deduction.
Okay. So what would?
So based on the budget that we presented, to go to that point would be a reduction of $244,940.
So 140. That's certainly not taking the budget surplus out of this number.
But again, as we've said over and over and over again, the budget is built each year based on, and the bulk of the budget is personnel, insurance, and special ed. And we project the budget based on the current individuals we have in each of the bargaining units based on the next year's salary going forward. Now, the difficulty in that, and realistically over the course of the last couple of years, in personnel alone, with changes in or retirements and changes in personnel, there's been a $390,000, $95,000 differential, and a $262,000 differential, just on changes in personnel, plus the impact that those changes may or may not have had with regard to insurance premiums. That adds another layer, not to mention the issue of the actual claims, because again, we project a 12-month rolling renewal based on the actual claims. The changes in plan design over the course of the last 2 years, 3 years, have taken our claims rate from over 80% to under 80%. which is the differential that the insurance companies are, they need to, their renewal rates are based on whether or not you are above or below that 80%. If you're above the 80%, you're going to see increases that are significant. If you're below that, and we've had the advantage of having low renewal rates, both on the town and on the Board of Ed, as a result of plan design changes and, in this case, some changes in personnel when that happens. The cost, the other part of that is the retirees still can buy into that insurance plan. They pay full freight, but their claims still add. So again, the changes that we've made have forced some behavior changes as well in terms of the usage and with the prescription drugs. So we've done the work on the front end to contain those costs, and as Bob is indicating, and Brad is suggesting, is that we have a bubble that we're about at least 2/3 of the way through with regard to the age of our teaching population. Another year, this year, and perhaps next year, depending on how that flows, will be really the end of the significant changes that will give us dollar savings in terms of personnel who are retiring out at the top end, and we're able to replace them with mid-range or lower replacements. And so what you're going to see is a trend that's going to start going the other direction, where you don't have the differential from one year to the next. And
that's what I'm really worried about. 2 years down the road, we're going to see probably interest rate increases. We're going to see changes in staffing. We're going to see increases in health. It's going to get much more expensive for the town.
And again, I think the focus here is that the work that we have done in the course of the last 3 years with work on our health insurance, our transportation bids, our contracts with utilities, even little changes like our photocopying costs, and then ultimately with personnel, we've kept that budget into a relatively small increase over each of those years. It would have been much worse had we not put those things into place, and particularly if we had not had any of those retirements. If we had not had those retirements, we would be still looking at those kinds of increases, and our new basis would not be as low as it is.
I agree with everything you're saying.
So
we're looking at it.
So the issue,
the fruits of your work.
Well, but unfortunately, there's a mindset that we're getting that is a deficit spending concept, that regardless of how we come forward, even with as little as $179,000, based on what we know today, there's still an issue of, well, there must be something in that budget that you can cut further. And I've walked through each of the things that we've reduced, we've contained. Now, if we have significant retirements, that number is probably $179,000 too high. But I don't have them right now, and I can't guarantee that I'm going to have them. So if I don't get them, and we reduce the budget significantly, then where are we? And I think in the big picture of things, the two, and I get it. I pay taxes in this town too. That we're trying to work on containing those costs, and the idea of what you're suggesting I do with capital, we'll work with it. But again, I'm afraid that a year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to be looking and we're going to have really short memories about the capital at that point, and saying, wow, you've got a 150,000% increase in your capital because you cut it in half. I mean, those are things that we need to make sure we understand going forward. There are going to be capital needs year after year after year. We're talking about a 0.59% increase in my operational budget. It's the smallest one you've ever seen in this town. Probably the smallest one you're going to see for a long time. And I would argue that even though we have a surplus, we've turned it back, we've helped do other things with those monies. You know, 2% on a $30 million budget is, you know, have your own budgets within 2%. Have your own budgets increased by only 0.59%. Given gas, given diesel, given fuel oil, given all those other factors. I don't think it can be done. This is a solid, tight budget that provides sound fiscal, responsible dollars for you to work with, and it meets the needs of our educational system. I would strongly urge you not to reduce it at this point. I think you need to let it stand on its own at 0.59. Thank you.
Well, I would make a recommendation that we go to the minimum budget requirement for the Board of Education budget.
You have to make a motion.
That is my motion.
Is there a second on that? So the minimum budget number that you're talking about is the one that Jack just gave us?
Yes.
Would that just come out of the operating number? That would be $30,390,862.
Say that one more, ask the question one more time.
30 million, I just was listening to you, you said something like 249, and I just did 250 and subtracted it from 3648.62.
Yeah, again, the state is in the process of projecting them. They are not solid. They are ultimately dependent on the budget that gets passed at the state level, the biennium budget. So, I mean, it is just a minimum budget requirement projection at this point. But that number is $30,395,922.
I don't know how we could even vote on that without knowing what that would affect. I mean, so many people spend so much time, all the departments telling us, you know, what they needed and what it would go for, and we just, again, I don't like the randomness of it all. If you're just gonna do that, then why even have a
Hold on now.
presentation?
There's been a motion, no second. Is there a second? There is no second. So we're looking at, just correct my math wrong, total education for $31,406,501. Please.
All right, the motion was made by Tom Holland. And
To just say this.
seconded by somebody.
I'll second.
Okay. To recommend and set the public hearing on April 3rd, 2013 at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of William C. Andrews Memorial Town Hall. The 2013-14 budget, total town, $15,441,209. Education, $31,406,501. Total expenditures of $46,847,710. That's total receipts of $9,037,929. Benefits to volunteer fire tax benefit of $56,000 and elderly tax benefit of $180,000. The total to be raised by local taxes of $38,045,781. The estimated sum to be raised by the tax levy is $38,507,876.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody? No? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
Seconded.
All right. Moving on. Thank you, everybody.